All right, here we are back again. And this time we're going to talk about nailing that interview. What are the tips, techniques you can use to go ahead and nail every interview you're in and have the best possibility of getting the right role at the right salary? I'm going to give you 6 tips, 6 techniques you can use for this. And if you stick around to the end, I'm going to give you a bonus tip that'll help you out in any given interview. While you're watching, remember that many of these techniques are exactly the same applicability for a salary negotiation or a promotion negotiation after that interview. Tip number 1 is really a series of ideas. Tip number 1 is the what not to do. There are a few things that I see happen again and again in candidates I interview, and I hear about it happening with other hiring managers I talk to. The first one is what I call the biggest weakness trap. There are a lot of interviewers that are going to ask you what your biggest weakness are, what your biggest failures might have been, that type of thing. What they want to see is how you react to that question and what types of answers you come up with. Now, you may be inclined to take those old advice methods of turning that weakness into a positive. And you might be inclined to give out BS like, well, my biggest weakness is I work too hard. Skip it. Leave that shit in the garbage pail where it belongs. When you get asked those questions, what you want to show is that you are a human, and like every other human on the planet, you have faults. You want to show that you can be self-conscious enough to understand where your weaknesses and faults are, and that you're working on them and or have worked on them to fix them. Use this opportunity to show them you can grow. Not that you're perfect, because nobody's perfect. One of the answers in the past that I've given when asked that question was for a leadership role I was interviewing for. And when asked that question, my response was, my biggest weakness in the past has been my leadership skill set, my ability to lead. I can get people to follow me and want to follow me, want to work with me, but I have an issue letting go of control. I always want to do everything myself, because I know I can do it better or faster. That negates my ability to mentor my team, and it negates my ability to scale. So I've worked quite a bit on that, learning how to let go, delegate, and be able to mentor my team below me, even though it might take a little more time in the short run. In the long run, it provides all of the advantages a leader should be providing from a perspective of scale and employee growth. It's not something I'm perfect at today, but it's something I'm growing at daily. An answer like that shows I've got a weakness, I've identified it, I know how to fix it, and I'm on that path. This is the type of person most hiring managers want to hire. Next tip is how to dress. You'll see a lot of interview advice, especially old school advice, where it tells you wear a suit and tie, do this, that, and the other. That advice is not all wrong, but what's more important is that you dress appropriately to the environment you are interviewing for. Now, you can never make a mistake in dressing a little further up than what the common people at the company dress, but don't go too far. If you're going to a campus where people come in khakis and polos, don't walk in a suit and tie. Maybe a sport coat and jeans for a man, or some sort of smart business outfit that's not a business suit for a woman. If you're going into a bank in New York, you're going to want to break out that business formal attire and ensure that you're looking top-notch in the way in which you wear it, in the way in which it's tailored, the best you have available. Don't look at dressing for an interview as one static way to dress. Get an idea for how people at the company dress and pick the best representation of yourself within that guideline. You don't have to wear something that you'd never want to wear or doesn't fit you, but you also don't want to look outside the part of what they're trying to adopt. They're not just looking to make sure that you have the skill set. They're making to look sure that you fit the culture. The next thing I see people make a mistake on all the time is they get into an interview, and because they're nervous and because they think that it's their job to talk about all the wonderful things that they can do, they talk the entire time. That is a mistake. 1, nobody likes to sit and listen to a monologue. 2, if you're talking the whole time, you're missing things they might say that cue you in on how you can relate to them. So you want to keep the conversation as close to 50-50 as possible, with the possibility of them talking more than you talk. If they're talking the whole time and they feel good about the fact that they talk and you can listen, you're going to come out of that interview with somebody who interviewed you thinking you're great. So don't overtalk. Use open-ended questions to get them to talk. If they give you a pause or they give you an opportunity to speak, give them the answer that they're looking for that fits your style and drop an open-ended question at the end. So what's the culture like here? Let them answer, let them talk. This is my favorite. Don't be a hostage taker. I can't tell you how many people I've had come interview with me and they come in with a list of demands, like they've got hostages at the bank and they're going to tell me everything I need to do for them. Obviously, a job is a two-way street. You're providing something to the company you're going to work for, and they're providing an environment and a paycheck that you're willing to take. That's fantastic. But the interview is your time to sell your value and differentiation to the employer, not your time to set out a list of demands. Especially important in the first interview. You can ask these questions. You can figure out if the culture fits there. You should be interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you, but you want to be delicate about it. When you get the opportunity to ask questions, ask them open-ended questions about the culture, about the balance, about the things that you care about, but don't come in with a this, and this. That might work once in a while, but it's not going to be an effective tool a statistically significant amount of time. So drop it from your repertoire. The last of the don't do's. Don't be late for an interview ever, under any circumstances, for any reason, period. When you're going to an interview, being late sets the stage for I don't care about you or your time. And you're saying that to the interviewer and to the company you're interviewing with. Do not allow this to happen. Personally, as a hiring manager, if you're less than 15 minutes late, you have a 1 to 5% chance of digging yourself out of that hole during the interview. If you are 15 minutes and 1 second late, I cancel the interview. We're not even going to talk. I'm a little harsh on it, but I know if you can't be late for the interview, if you can't be on time for the interview, I can't trust you on anything. And if I'm wrong occasionally, that's fine by me, because on the whole, that's going to carry forward. When you're going to an interview, find a coffee shop, a place to eat, something walking distance nearby to where you're going to interview. Get there an hour and a half early. Relax. Prepare for your interview without having to rush through a commute or anything else. Grab a meal, grab a cup of tea, whatever your thing is. Run things through your head and get ready for the interview. That way, when it comes time, you've got no excuses for being late. If there was 45 minutes or an hour of extra traffic, if 3 things came up in your life, you still got cushion to be able to get to that interview on time. Don't be late. I'm going to give you one tip here for being able to maintain confidence without cockiness. And then step number 6, towards the end of the video, we're going to go through another technique that I find as powerful. To maintain your confidence while you're talking in an interview, try and stick to your power base. And I'll define your power base as the things, the skills, whatever you know that you know, the stuff you're best at. This may not be stuff that you'd walk into one of your friends or family members and say, I'm great at X, but you know intrinsically that you're good at it, damn good at it even. Stick to conversations around those skills, and your natural knowledge of your own strength will keep that confidence in your body language, in your posture, in your eye contact, and all the rest. So stick to the things that you inherently know you're good at, and if you have to come off that line, try and keep it brief and bring it back to your power base whenever you can. One thing you can do to keep that confidence up with a smaller power base, just a few things that you know that you're great at, is to work to intersperse conversations or statements about that power base throughout the interview. Talk a little bit about it in the beginning and then a little towards the middle, a little bit at the end. You're going to bring that confidence level up each time you hit something that you know you're great at, and it will carry forward. It may ebb or drop off as you go, so then you can grab that conversation and bring it back up. Get used to having that conversation and go practice it in front of some friends and family members that you can trust to give you objective feedback on how you're talking about it. When you're interviewing, you don't want to be Gumby. Employers want somebody who's flexible and adaptable, but they don't want somebody who's going to bend over to every whim, every difference of opinion, everything that comes around. And if they do want somebody like that, you want to be interviewing somewhere else. So when you're interviewing, don't be Gumby. Have integrity. Understand what you believe in, and how you stand for that within the realm of the role you're going to play at the company. And don't budge too far off that during the interview. You want to be able to be firm on the things that you truly believe in and have an open, non-combative discussion about it if necessary. But you don't simply want to take somebody else's opinion and replicate it straight back to them at every given point. I'll give you one example I've used in an interview to hold my integrity base while being real without being overly flexible. And this is a bit of an extreme example. I'm not necessarily going to recommend you do this level, but it gives you an example of how far you can go as long as you're coming from a base of knowledge and integrity. Years ago, I was interviewing with a service provider that had just built out and launched a cloud computing offering. And this was in the fairly early days of cloud computing. I was interviewing for a technical architect, cloud architect role with them. And during the interview, I was interviewing with 5 gentlemen who had developed, built, and now owned the cloud practice for this service provider. And at some point, the lead or senior interviewer asked me what I thought of their cloud offering. Now, I stopped and paused to think about the question, let the silence sit. But while I was thinking about the question, I had a problem. I didn't have a single good thing to say about their cloud offering. It was fairly lackluster, it was late to market, it had very little chance of becoming the cloud or even one of the top clouds. So I had to decide how to answer that. Remember that I had to maintain my integrity and show them that I have knowledge in this industry and I know what I'm doing. So as I was pausing and thinking this through, I scanned the room, making eye contact with each of the 6 individuals, and then finalized locking eyes with the gentleman that asked the question. And I replied, "Who are you?" And I paused. And the room went dead silent for 30 seconds or more. You could hear a pin drop. And finally he cracked a smile and said, "That's fair." And we continued the interview. And a week later, I got a written offer for a base salary I've never seen, never had an offer for before. Now, I got the offer I wanted, which is my end goal for any interview. I had to turn down the offer because that question made me realize I didn't believe in the product and my integrity wouldn't allow me to go sell it. Technique number 4, you want to sell first, negotiate later. You don't want to get into a salary or benefits negotiation with an employer until they're absolutely sold on the fact that they want you to be an employee. So you want to make sure you've done all of the things you can do to sell yourself before you try and take the conversation to a negotiation. In most cases, you don't even want to try and take the conversation to the negotiation. You want to let them bring that point forward, because that's the point where they're definitely interested in you, or at least feasibly interested in you. So you want to make sure that you've gone through, sold your value, done that in a differentiated fashion, not just table stakes, but in a way that's relevant and differentiated to them. And you want to ensure that you've got that solidly set in their mind and you're getting the right positive body postures, the smiles, the replies, the retorts. You're getting the right kinship with that interviewer before you let the conversation get to a salary negotiation. If you're not sitting in a positive light with that interviewer when you get to the salary negotiation, you're just not going to get the salary you want or the job at all. Now, every salary negotiation is different. Some companies might handle it within that first interview, and it's something you have to do then. Some, it might be 10 interviews down the road, or maybe the hiring manager has nothing to do with it, and you're talking to an HR rep. Whatever the case, you want to make sure you've sold yourself before you get to a point where you start having a conversation about salary. Rule number 5, during your interview, you want to find a way to be memorable, to do something that differentiates you from the other people that are interviewing and stick in the mind of that interviewer. Now, you don't want to do something so over the top, showing up in clown shoes or some BS gimmick. Drop that type of idea. But you want to look for ways during the interview to be memorable. Now, there might be some simple ways where you can relate to that interview on a personal level. If you're asking good open-ended questions, you might find commonality like a sports team or a school or a passion of some sort. And that's a great way to be memorable and stick in that interviewer's head. But whatever it is, you need to find something. That way when they go through all the resumes and all the interviews later, they remember you for something. So one example I've done in the past is I was interviewing for a technical role at a large company, and I was interviewing with 2 of their very top technical architects. I mean, really smart gentlemen who knew their role quite well. And during the interview, they asked me an obscure question about a fairly little known product that I happen to have a deep level of expertise in because of my involvement with the product throughout its development cycle. So when they asked me the question, I thought about providing them the standard answer to the question they asked. Instead, I glanced over and saw a whiteboard on the wall of the conference room where we were interviewing, and I asked if I could use it. They agreed, and I proceeded to spend 5 to 10 minutes whiteboarding the architecture of the product, how their question related to that architecture, and then answering the question in a whiteboard format. I nailed the interview, I got the job, and to this day, those 2 gentlemen are friends and say that's the best interview they've ever had. That's the first and only interview they've ever been in where they learned something from the candidate. So find a way to be memorable. There's always going to be something, look for it. Number 6, and probably the most important. When you're in an interview, you want to tell a story. Think about it in advance. You want to plan out the story you're going to tell and what you're going to hit on. Stories are absolutely critical. So critical, in fact, that my next video is going to be on the art of storytelling and how it applies to sales, how it applies to presenting, how it applies to interviews, salary negotiation, promotion negotiation. Stories hit a part of our brain that the normal conversation doesn't. Stories open up our imagination, and stories also allow you to talk a lot about yourself in a way that isn't arrogant, but also allows the interviewer to picture it and really hear what it is you're saying. So when you're preparing for your interview, think of a story that speaks to your strengths, your qualities, maybe something you definitely want to get across, and prepare that story. Practice it with some friends. Practice it with your parents or your family members, whoever it may be. Find somebody to bounce it off on and get some feedback on how you tell that story. You want to focus on your key strengths throughout the story. You want to use some specific detail when you're telling that story. And you want to make it as real as possible. The beauty of storytelling is what it does for your body posture and your facial expressions. It's going to make everything you say believable. And most importantly, it's going to make it believable that you believe what you're saying because it's your story, and so the natural triggers in your brain will bring out the exact posture, cadence, so on, that you want to be representing. It's absolutely critical that an interviewer believe that you believe what you're saying. And the storytelling will help you do that. All right, so we've covered our 6 techniques that you can use to nail every interview. Here's a bonus technique. Before you go into an interview, you've probably been told to do some research on the company, and that's awesome advice. Figure out what you can about the company. If they're publicly traded, the easiest place to look is on any investing website. Figure out what they've been doing lately, where they're making investments, that type of thing. Use that information and prepare something in your mind, 1 or 2 things to have in your back pocket, ready to drop during the interview. You want to make something that you see that's new and relevant about the company yours. You want to apply it to your interests, your skill set, what you're doing, especially if it's ancillary to the role you're interviewing for. This shows your interest in the company, it shows your adaptability, and it shows your ability to apply different knowledge to your own skill set. So research the company, look for something like that brings interest to you, figure out how you're going to weave it into your stories while you're telling or going to the interview or in the interview, and go nail that interview. I really hope you're enjoying this content. If you are, please be sure to hit subscribe below, like the video, and share it with some friends. Open up the show notes and find additional information, as well as a link to buy merchandise from My Career, My Rules. Thanks for watching. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Check the show notes for links to more information and merchandise.